Static crackles, the screen flicker glitching in and out before a distorted GoPro angle locks in. Trees, night, just the dim glow of a dying campfire, and the sound of wind rustling through leaves like whispers. Suddenly, movement. A shape enters the frame from the far edge, slow, deliberate. A woman, thin, impossibly still. She's wearing a wide-brimmed red hat, too clean, too vibrant for the dirty forest around her. Her face is pale, almost blurred by the camera. She's not blinking. She takes a step forward, then another, until she's inches from the lens. Her eyes are wrong, like they're looking through the camera, past the screen, at you. She doesn't speak. She doesn't move. The fire flickers behind her, casting strange shadows that crawl up the trees like fingers. In her arms, she's cradling something, a bundle wrapped in white, stained with something dark at the edges. It twitches, but she doesn't notice. The GoPro glitches again, lines distort the image, but she doesn't move an inch. A soft hum begins, a lullaby, barely audible, off-key, broken. It sounds like it's coming from inside the camera. Then, without warning, she tilts her head. It's subtle, barely noticeable, but it feels wrong. Too smooth, too quiet, the kind of motion you only see in things that shouldn't be real. She stays like that for 13 seconds. The screen cuts to black, silence, and then a voice, soft, almost a breath against the speaker. She watched us all night, and we didn't even know. And that was just the beginning. Because what we found on that footage wasn't just disturbing, it was a warning. Something we didn't understand until it was far too late. Elena and Mark weren't the kind of couple you'd expect to see deep in the woods, miles from the nearest signal bar or coffee shop. She was a graphic designer burned out from constant deadlines, and he was a software engineer slowly unraveling under the hum of fluorescent lights in corporate meetings. They needed a reset, a pause, a silence that only nature could give them. So when Mark stumbled across an online post about a forgotten trail in the Pacific Northwest, untouched, unlabeled, and rarely visited, they packed their gear and didn't tell a soul where they were going. The drive took them 6 hours, then a hike, 3 more, no cell service, no trail markers, just the endless green of moss-covered trees, the kind that looked older than memory, their limbs twisting like frozen screams. A heavy mist clung low to the forest floor, rolling between tree trunks like breath. It wasn't just quiet, it was hollow, the kind of silence that made your ears ring, like the forest had swallowed every sound just seconds before you arrived. Drone footage captured the setting sun bleeding through the fog, casting long shadows over the canopy. From above, the forest looked endless. Below, it felt alive. Every crack of a branch underfoot made them freeze. Not out of fear, but awe at first. Like they'd stepped into a place that didn't belong to time anymore. A place the modern world had simply forgotten. They found a clearing just before dusk. A circle of trees bent unnaturally outward, as if something had pushed them from the center. Mark joked that it looked like a perfect camping spot. Elena hesitated just for a second, but smiled and agreed. They set up their tent, lit a small fire, and laughed under the stars for the first time in months. For a moment, it really did feel like escape, like maybe they'd found something sacred. But as the last light drained from the sky, the forest didn't feel peaceful anymore. It felt aware. Branches stopped moving, the wind stopped blowing. Even the fire seemed to burn quieter. And far off, somewhere between the trees, something watched. Neither of them noticed then. They were too busy recording the night sky on their GoPro, unaware of what it would capture, unaware that their escape into nature had led them straight into the arms of something that never wanted them to leave. It began with a sound that didn't belong. Elena was heating soup over the fire, while Mark adjusted the GoPro on a nearby rock, trying to get the perfect angle of the stars that would soon appear. Then, just barely, something floated through the trees. A lullaby. Soft, broken, like it was being hummed by someone who had forgotten how the melody was supposed to go. It didn't echo like a real voice. It drifted, as though the forest itself had begun to hum. They froze. Elena turned to Mark. "Did you hear that?" He nodded, already rising to his feet, flashlight in hand. It wasn't curiosity that pulled them from their camp. It was that strange, irresistible instinct humans have to move towards something we know we shouldn't. The kind that makes you walk into the dark just to prove nothing's there. But something was there. They followed the sound, weaving between trees, the light from Mark's flashlight flickering against wet bark. The lullaby grew louder, clearer. They passed a half-rotten tree stump covered in claw-like roots, then stepped into a narrow clearing they hadn't noticed before. And there she was, a woman, standing completely still in the center of the clearing, barefoot, mud caked up to her ankles. Her skin was pale, almost bluish, and her head was bowed slightly as she rocked a bundle in her arms. It was wrapped in an old white blanket, fraying at the corners, stained a deep rust color in several places. But what froze them in place wasn't the bundle. It was the hat. Bright red, wide-brimmed, impossibly clean. It looked like something pulled from a different time, untouched by the forest. She didn't look at them, just kept humming, rocking. Her lips moved slightly, muttering something beneath the lullaby. "Ma'am, are you okay?" Mark asked, voice trembling more than he intended. The woman stopped humming. The forest went dead silent. Then, without lifting her head, "He's sleeping. Don't wake him." The bundle twitched. Elena grabbed Mark's arm. The trees seemed to lean in, as if they were holding their breath. They should have turned back right then, but they didn't. They didn't want to leave her out there. As strange as she was, barefoot, pale, cradling something too still to be alive, there was something fragile about her. Broken, maybe. Elena looked at her and didn't see a threat. She saw a woman who had lost too much for too long. And maybe that's what made it worse. Pity is a dangerous feeling in the wrong setting. They offered her a spot near their camp, just a patch of flat earth beneath the trees. She nodded once, slow and deliberate, and without a word began assembling a small tent. It was old, canvas, frayed. The poles snapped into place with unsettling silence. No sound but the creak of damp fabric. She never looked at them, not once. Dinner was quiet. They offered her food. She didn't answer, just sat cross-legged by her tent, rocking the bundle in her arms, her lips barely moving. Elena caught a few words, familiar but warped. "Don't wake him. Never when the moon is hungry." The fire crackled. The woods breathed around them, colder now. Closer. That night, as they zipped up their tent, Elena whispered, "Do you think she's okay?" Mark hesitated. She didn't blink once. "I don't know what that means." They tried to sleep, but sometime past midnight, just as the fire outside burned itself into embers, they heard it. A baby's cry. Not sharp or loud, but strained, raspy, like something pretending to be a baby, but not quite getting it right. It echoed once, then again, longer the second time. Mark sat up, grabbed the flashlight. "Stay here," he said. Elena didn't argue. He stepped out in the darkness. The beam of light flickered across the trees. The woman's tent in the distance, silent, still zipped shut. No movement. He circled the area. Nothing. No sound. No prints. Just cold, thick air and the feeling of being watched. Back inside, Elena muttered, "Probably a fox, or some animal mimicking. Happens in some forests, right?" But her voice lacked conviction. Outside, the woman began humming again, the same lullaby, slower this time, lower, and neither of them slept. Morning came with a gray, sickly light that bled through the trees like something rotten waking up. The fire had long died. The air felt heavier than it should have, thick, almost wet. Elena unzipped the tent first. Mark followed, his breath already visible despite it being late spring. Something was wrong. The woman's tent, just a few feet from theirs, stood wide open. The flap flailed slightly in the wind, but the inside was empty. No blanket, no bundle, no trace of anyone ever sleeping there. It wasn't just clean, it was untouched. Mark called out once, then again. No answer. The forest didn't even echo. It just absorbed the sound. Elena stepped forward, her boots sinking slightly into the moss. She glanced down and stopped cold. The spot where the woman had sat all night was soaked, not with water. The ground was dark, almost black and sticky, like something had seeped into it from beneath. No rain had fallen. The surrounding soil was dry, but this patch, perfectly circular, as if her presence had burned into the earth, stank faintly of iron. Mark crouched down and brushed his fingers near it. "It's warm," he muttered. Then he noticed something stranger. No footprints. Not a single one. No indentation from where she might have stood, walked, or moved. Not even a trace of the bundle she carried. As if she'd simply risen into the air or sunk through the ground. Elena stepped back, unsettled. She turned to look at the trees, and that's when she saw it. A thread, thin, crimson, caught in a low-hanging branch just above head height. It twisted slightly in the breeze, glinting like silk in the pale light. She reached out and plucked it free. It wasn't thread. It was hair. Long, red, unnatural. When she held it up to the light, it shimmered, not with color, but with something deeper, darker. Almost like it pulsed. A sudden gust of wind tore through the clearing. And just for a moment, far off in the woods, they both heard it again. That same lullaby. Closer this time. The forest had an eerie way of looking exactly the same, no matter what time it was. Morning didn't feel like morning. It felt like the night had simply changed masks. She was gone. No goodbye. No sound of her leaving. No trace of the red hat. The damp spot on the ground had dried as if it had never been there. Even the strange, pulsing strand of hair Elena had found was no longer in her pocket. She was sure she hadn't dropped it, but now there was nothing. Mark did another lap around the trees, calling out louder than before, trying to convince himself that maybe she'd wandered off. Maybe she wasn't a ghost or a hallucination, just a woman, troubled and lost, who left before sunrise. But in the back of his mind, something whispered the truth. She didn't walk away. She disappeared. Elena didn't say much. She just sat by the burned-out fire pit, staring at the GoPro. They'd left it running overnight, hoping to capture a time-lapse of the stars and the tree silhouettes shifting with the night. At the time, it seemed like a romantic idea, something peaceful to look back on. Now it felt like a box they weren't sure they wanted to open. Still, Elena powered it on. The screen lit up. A simple folder of files. She clicked the most recent one, timestamped just before midnight. The image appeared, static at first, then slowly focusing. The campfire, the shadows, the two of them climbing into the tent in the distance. The crackle of flame, the low hum of wind, the faint murmur of the woods breathing. Normal, boring even. But Elena kept watching. The stars moved, the trees barely shifted. Time passed, hours and minutes, still nothing, until something flickered at the edge of the frame. She leaned closer, pausing the video. There, just for a heartbeat, a shape between the trees. She pressed play again. Time sped forward. The fire died down to glowing coals. And then, at exactly 3:07 a.m., the woman in the red hat stepped into frame, backwards. No sound, no footsteps, just the crunch of leaves without feet to cause them. Elena didn't breathe. Mark, standing behind her now, asked, "What are we looking at?" But she didn't answer. She didn't blink, because the woman was still moving, and she was getting closer. The footage didn't feel like something they were watching. It felt like something that was watching them. The longer it played, the colder the air around them seemed to grow, as if the forest itself was leaning in to listen. Elena kept her eyes locked on the screen while Mark stood behind her, silent, arms crossed, as if bracing for impact. At 1:14 a.m., the woman appeared. No warning, no build-up. One frame she wasn't there. Then the next, she was, walking backwards into the shot from the tree line, as if being pulled by invisible threads. Her movements were slow, smooth, almost fluid, like she was underwater. The red hat glowed unnaturally against the darkness. The bundle in her arms rocked slightly, swaying with a rhythm that didn't match her steps. She stopped near the fire pit, long extinguished by then, and turned, still without sound, her face just barely visible beneath the brim of her hat. Not quite facing the camera, not quite looking away, like she knew exactly where the lens was, but refused to meet it. Not yet. At 2:33 a.m., she was crouched beside their tent. They hadn't heard a sound that night, not a whisper, not a twig snap. But here she was, rocking that bundle in her arms, mumbling something that couldn't be heard through the footage. Yet somehow, just watching it, Alina could feel the words. They crawled beneath her skin. Like lullabies sung through the floorboards of a forgotten house. Her head jerked occasionally, like she was nodding to something no one else could see. Then, at 4:01 a.m., she stood, over the tent, motionless, directly above where Elena and Mark were sleeping, her face now fully in view, expressionless, mouth slightly open, eyes wide, unblinking. The hat cast a shadow across her forehead, but her eyes still caught the low light of dawn. They didn't look human. Not hollow, but too full, as if she wasn't seeing them, but remembering them. She stayed there, not swaying, not moving. For 4 full hours, the stars shifted, the camera's battery meter ticked lower, but she didn't blink, not once. Then, just before sunrise, she tilted her head, straight into the lens, and smiled. They thought leaving the forest would be the end of it. They were wrong. Back home, the world returned to its usual noise. Traffic, emails, flickering streetlights, all the artificial comforts that kept reality grounded. For a while, they told themselves what they'd seen was just exhaustion, overactive imagination, maybe something they'd eaten. But deep down, they both knew the footage was real. And whatever that thing in the red hat was, it had noticed them. The first sign was small, innocent even. Elena opened the dryer one morning and found something tangled in the sheets. A single red thread, long, coarse, still damp. She stared at it for a long time, trying to remember if she'd packed anything red on the trip. She hadn't. She never wore red. She threw it out. Didn't tell Mark. That night, as she was brushing her teeth, her phone buzzed. A notification. Voice memo saved. She hadn't recorded anything. She opened the file. There was no sound at first, just static. Then, layered beneath the noise, something soft. A melody. Familiar. Off-key. A lullaby. The same one from the woods. She dropped the phone. Mark didn't believe her until it happened to him. He was working late, headphones on, staring at lines of code when his monitor glitched, just for a second. The static cut in, sharp and loud, followed by something that froze him in place. Laughter, but not human laughter. High-pitched, garbled, like it was being forced through a bad radio connection. A baby's laugh, but not joyful. He shut the laptop. That night, they didn't speak much. At 3:07 a.m., Elena woke to find the bedroom colder than it should have been. Her breath hung in the air like smoke. The window was closed. The heat was on. But the cold had a shape to it, an edge. She turned over. Mark was asleep. On the nightstand, her phone lit up. No ringtone, just the screen glowing. And the words, "He's sleeping. Don't wake him." The phone turned off by itself. She didn't sleep after that, because even in the silence of their apartment, they both began to feel it. Something had followed them back, and it was waiting. Elena couldn't let it go. The images from the forest haunted her, burrowed beneath her skin like splinters. She told herself she was only revisiting the footage to find clarity, to prove that her memory was playing tricks. But in truth, something had been gnawing at her ever since they left the woods. Something about the way the woman rocked that bundle. It never moved the way a baby should. Too stiff, too silent, like it wasn't meant to move at all. She sat alone at her desk with blinds closed, the glow of the screen casting her face in flickering blue. The footage loaded again. She skipped past the hour she already knew by heart, 1:14 a.m., the backward entrance. 2:33 a.m., the crouching. 4:01 a.m., the standing. She paused there. The woman towered over their tent, unmoving, the bundle nestled in her arms like a secret. Elena hit the frame-by-frame key. Slowly, carefully, she zoomed in. The image sharpened, pixel by pixel. She adjusted the contrast, the brightness, drew the image closer until the bundle, wrapped in that same white blood-speckled cloth, filled the screen. And that's when she saw it. The edge of the fabric had slipped, just enough to reveal what lay beneath. Not baby skin, not a child's cheek, a face, her face, eyes closed, mouth sewn shut with what looked like coarse red thread. She recoiled from the screen, breath caught in her throat. Her reflection in the darkened monitor stared back, horrified. She blinked, shook her head, played the frames again. Still there. Her face. How was it possible? She scrubbed further, watched the woman rock the bundle again, whispering to it with a tenderness that now felt like mockery. The thread over the mouth tight, the eyes sunken, no motion, no breath, like a death mask stitched from her own skin. Elena backed away from the screen. She suddenly remembered something the woman had whispered that night in the woods, words she hadn't understood until now. "He's sleeping. Don't wake him. Not until she forgets who she is." Something cold touched Elena's shoulder. She turned, but no one was there. And behind her on the screen, the woman was smiling. Mark woke in the dark, the kind of darkness that didn't feel like night, but something deeper, like the world had turned its face away. At first, he wasn't sure what had stirred him. No sounds, no movement, just the strange sensation of being watched, a pressure in the air, a presence pressing down. He blinked, letting his eyes adjust. That's when he saw her, Elena, standing perfectly still at the foot of the bed. She was wearing something he hadn't seen her touch since the forest, a red hat, wide-brimmed, impossibly clean. It shouldn't have followed them home, but there it was, casting a shadow across her face, hiding her eyes. His voice caught in his throat. "Elena?" She didn't respond. She swayed slightly, barely moving like a puppet on threads too thin to see. Then softly she began to hum. The tune was faint, broken, familiar. That same lullaby, the same one they heard in the woods. The same one the woman had sung in whispers. But now it came from Elena's mouth, slow and slurred, like the melody was older than her voice could carry. "Babe," Mark said again, this time sharper, more desperate. She didn't move, didn't blink, just kept humming, and then whispering something under her breath, the words barely parting her lips. He sat up, reaching toward her. "Elena, what are you doing?" Finally, she lifted her face, and he saw her eyes, empty, no fear, no light, just the kind of hollow that lives in things long dead and never buried. Her voice dropped to a whisper, calm, cold, almost loving. "He's sleeping. Don't wake him." Then the screen goes black. There's no scream, no music, just silence for a full 5 seconds. Then a soft rustle, a creak, the sound of someone shifting weight near your ear, and one last whisper, close, too close. "He's still dreaming." End. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's ghost story. See you in the next, even more thrilling stories. If possible, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel to support me in creating more ghost stories for you. Thank you so much. Goodbye, and see you again.